Wisdom and Knowledge starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm Mark, and we welcome Ian Ball in Montreal. And Ian, tonight I want to discuss, are we headed towards an economic crash? Is our economy about to crash in 2024? And there's just so many signs already pointing that direction. And what do you see up there so far?
Well, I think there's been a lot of predictions of an economic crash. And I think it started off slowly and it's built up a bit of momentum. And what we're seeing here in Canada is that we've got a federal government that is basically, it's like you gave a credit card to a teenager and you didn't give them any guidelines, and they just go out and they'll buy whatever they think they want to buy that suits their needs. And it just, the bill balloons, and they basically no limit. So here's the critical part. There's no credit limit on that card. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction. That's the analogy with our federal government. They spend money on programs that have received very little scrutiny from the regular parliamentary process, because they've teamed up with the NDP. So it's an NDP Liberal government. They basically can vote in any type of law or policy that they want, as long as it gets through the Senate as well. And they're spending money like crazy. And it ramped up it's been going on, but it really ramped up in 2019. They'll spend money on programs and they just have very little oversight. So I'm going to give you a particular example of how they spend money without any proper due diligence. There was an application that they introduced called the ArriveCan application. Now, this was a application that you would have on your mobile phone, but you could also fill it out on a computer, in which you would basically, it was a redundant system of filling out your information that you would normally fill out when you come into Canada. So it was a duplication, and it just transfers that data to the system, and it's kind of a way of tracking and tracing people as well. So it was it had that sort of sinister element to it. Now, this application cost the government the taxpayers $54 million. There's an enormous amount of scrutiny now. There's an RCMP investigation with one of the contractors called JC Experts that was basically the middle man to choose a subcontractor to build the application. So here you have this middleman consisting of two individuals who did absolutely nothing in terms of the actual development of this application. They got $11 million out of the $54 million to just subcontract it out and kind of manage that contract. It stinks to high heaven. I mean, it's so obvious that there's like a scandal involved. So that's one example. And so what's happened over all these years, and it goes back 8 years when they were first elected, they haven't managed to try to balance the budget, because their philosophy was, and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau actually said in an interview or at one of his statements that, the budget will balance itself. So can you imagine, it's crazy. And that's basically the idea, is like, just, we're using their agenda as the basis of pushing all sorts of initiatives. Here's an example that people probably don't even know. I read about in my university magazine just the other day, Concordia University here in Montreal.
Okay.
They gave a $132 million grant to the university to research into basically sustainable building practices and also decarbonization.
Wow.
Decarbonization, which is, of course, a whole subject that we could obviously dig into, but $132 million.
Wow.
And it just so what's happened is that it's just the basic principle of economics. They're printing money like crazy. The in the Bank of Canada is trying to counterbalance that by raising interest rates. So what happened was there was a massive hike in the interest rates in the past year and a half. About
Mhm.
it went from literally it's doubled or more. Okay, and so what's happening is now that when people go to renew their mortgages, when they were paying maybe $1,600 per month, they might be paying $3,200 or more on their mortgage payments because of this increase. When they go to renew it, they'll have no choice but to have to accept the latest rate from the Bank of Canada, which is factored into these mortgage rates. It is so bad that people can no longer afford to pay their mortgages. Now, sometimes these are senior people who are still
Oh, jeez,
paying off
yeah.
their mortgages. Now, here's the hitch. Here's the catch. They actually have to sell their homes, but they can't afford to pay rent because the rent across Canada, which was just recently published, you might have seen this meme that was going viral that was showing the rents across the country for a 2-bedroom apartment. It is like people cannot afford it at
Hmm.
all. So there are cases where you have even nurses, people in a technical trade or whatever, they actually have to move out of their houses and sometimes move into a van. So they're like one step away from being, well, they are homeless. And this is what's happening. It's a reality. It's a terrible reality. Elderly people who cannot afford their rent. There was a case where there was an elderly lady who put up a notice just posting on a lamppost asking if anybody would be able to rent her a room.
Jeez.
That's how desperate it's gotten. So you can imagine like people like single moms, they're on one income and they get, forget about trying to get the support from the government, because what this government does is every time, for example, the housing crisis, which they finally were pressured into recognizing, and their solution was basically to throw millions of dollars at the municipal governments to try to um, foster or cultivate housing development. But all it does is it channels it so that they hire more bureaucrats to try to manage that. So the money goes to the bureaucrats, and you'll probably never see a house built in a couple of years. So their plan is so backwards and it's so wrong. They're never going to be able to catch up. Now, the other part of the equation of this housing crisis, which is the general economic crisis here in Canada, is that they're trying to increase their number of immigrants into Canada. And you have to have the right balance. Like right now, they're targeting 500,000 per year. For a country of 38 million, that is a very significant number.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
it's actually very unfair for the immigrants that they're trying to bring into the country. Not to mention the Canadians that are getting further and further burdened with, the costs of, initially supporting, and then, just they can't even contribute to the tax base. So it's just the burden on the Canadian citizens increase. And these immigrants who come here realize they can't afford they can't survive in this country. So it's hurting both the immigrants and the citizens. So it's not helpful to have that number. They have to, that's a problem in itself. And here's another problem which has added greatly to the problem of inflation and the increased costs of foods, in housing and everything that needs to be built or transport, the carbon tax.
Oh, yeah. I've heard a lot about that.
It is so insane. I can't tell you how wrong it is, because first of all, carbon dioxide, for all your viewers out there, because in my background, I work as a building engineer, with a professional engineer. I'm a building scientist. I understand the science very well, and I go against the current because a lot of my colleagues and peers believe that they are trying to save the planet, and they think that reducing carbon dioxide or the carbon footprint is the way to go. The way that I kind of look at it is, I say, I'm just trying to make the building more efficient, and whatever emissions reduce, that's obviously a good thing. But I do not emphasize trying to reduce carbon dioxide. That's not my goal. That is not my vision. Because carbon dioxide is a necessary gas for our planet, and if it gets too low, we can basically say goodbye to our flora and fauna. Agriculture will become very difficult, because carbon dioxide is necessary to fuel the growth of plants. That's just the basis of life. We are carbon creatures.
Mhm.
So this whole notion that carbon dioxide is some sort of nefarious greenhouse gas is the greatest scam the world has ever seen. So all your viewers that see this, please take this into consideration, because every time you're going to, they're pushing it like it's like there's some sort of emergency that's going to happen, and it's not happening, and it won't happen due to carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
So getting back to the carbon tax, so because they've treated carbon as a dirty, toxic greenhouse gas, they put a tax on it. So any fuel has an extra tax added, but it's not only an extra. They actually had a tax, and then you put another tax, and then it's taxed at the end because of the sales tax. It's basically, and we have sales, provincial and federal, so it quadruples in some case the tax effect. Now, this has had an absolute concrete effect on what we're seeing here in Canada. It is one of the fundamental reasons why the food prices have gone through the roof. And basically, you're faced with a choice to, I'm quoting Pierre Polyev, but you got to eat or heat. You got to make a choice. You're going to buy food and cut back on your heating, or heat your home and cut back on your eating. And it's not an exaggeration. It is not. This is the choice that people. So finally, the maritime provinces became a hot topic because their constituents were complaining about the carbon tax to such an extent that finally the Liberal Party members of Parliament who were in the Maritimes had the guts to stand up and tell the Prime Minister that you can't do this any longer. You have to give them a break. So what does he do? He gives them a break in the Maritimes only.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's like, can you imagine? Like, it doesn't take much. It's like politics 101. Like, you're actually, it's like, that's discrimination 101.
Oh yeah,
it's like
big time.
So they got themselves into big trouble with that, and it's blown up. And not only that, the indigenous chiefs from various First Nations are also getting penalized, because here is what's happening: is that when they're claiming that when they give out this tax, that they have to do, because even the environmental minister Guilbeault said that he would resign if they cut it back any further. So imagine that. He's threatening his own leader, say, if you do any more cutbacks on this carbon tax, I'm.
Yeah. Sorry, there was a snowstorm up in Montreal and Ian's area. I really feel for you. Technical difficulties. We're back.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everybody.
No, it's all good.
But we'll pick up for exactly where I left off. So we were talking about how the indigenous people are basically getting penalized, and I'll explain why. So part of they give rebates back to citizens from the carbon tax. So you pay the carbon tax and you're at a certain income level, they will give you credit back for that. The problem is that in First Nations, they do not pay taxes. therefore they don't get rebates, and therefore they're penalized without any rebate. So it's someone they haven't really thought this out. You can tell, and you now have the indigenous groups that are coming forth and making complaints, and that's a nightmare for the federal government, who tries, with their woke agenda and trying to, every time that someone speaks, they declare where they are, which native lands that they're presently on, and that's part of the woke agenda, is that they do that now. They say, oh, I'm on such and such land, and just to bring it to attention, rather than saying I'm in the city of Ottawa, they say this is traditional land from such and such. So that's part of the woke agenda.
Okay.
And so this is their nightmare for them, that the Aboriginals are coming forward with this. So all of this is accumulated into a enormous economic crunch. And when people are going to have to renew their mortgages, that's where it's going to be it's going to maybe make 2008 look like it'll look like a light version of what's going to happen in Canada, because we didn't go through the housing bubble you did, because the Harper government at the time, the Conservatives, managed the economy very well, and we weathered through that crisis in 2008. Wow. So this time, because then then the prices just gradually kept building up across the country. Here's an example, a concrete example of comparison of an equivalent home in Windsor, and then you go right across the border. What would it be? Is it Detroit? Yeah, I think it's Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit's on the other side of Windsor.
Yeah. So you basically compare apples with apples. Same house, same number of rooms, roughly the same size of the property, everything. On the US side, $160,000 US. Okay. On the Canadian side, 600,000 Canadian, so about like 520,000 US.
Jeez. Oh, wow.
So here's an example, even because my sister and brother-in-law, they just bought a property and a chalet in the US, right across the border in New York State. Okay.
Yeah.
They bought the land, combined land and cottage. So these are two pieces of land and a chalet, small chalet, for $99,000 US.
Wow.
In Canadian side, and it's also right on the shores of the Chateauguay River.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they got 730 feet of riverfront. Right. In Canada, right across the border, you wouldn't get anything less than $350,000 or more easily.
Yeah.
So, it's the situation, and I sincerely believe that this is by design. That's
definitely.
It's a subject that I've been researching for many years in terms of how this economic slavery and collapse has been provoked and so forth. But I know you have some things to say about what's happening in the US that are comparable.
Yeah, it seems very similar. Do you think that Canada is just a bit ahead of the US? But it seems like they're almost on par. You get all these migrants coming in, and I don't get it. Like they're sleeping outside the police station in Chicago. That's what I've heard. And I mean, there's videos of it. It seems, you and I, we're all humanitarians. We don't like to play this left versus right or whatever, or political nonsense. But why are all the people who say open borders, why do they want people to come here so they can starve and live on the streets? That makes no sense whatsoever. And you look at the rise in food prices here and the quality of food. You get people like Bill Gates he bought out Bragg's, organic, the apple cider vinegar. And so he can put his Appeal, which Appeal is a coating. We don't even know what it's made of. that they put on, and they can put it on organic produce too. You get so many things. And then you also, in the US, I don't know if they have this in Canada, but the US, so many people are reliant on the government. They're enslaved in EBT. Do they have that in Canada? The EBT cards, the food stamps type thing?
Food stamps? Oh, yes. Okay, so that's a very good point. And
Yeah.
there's been an analysis that was done in terms of the increased number of people on food stamps in Canada, or food banks, as we call them here.
Okay.
It has increased like 60 to 100%. The number of people is they've never seen this number of people. They're reporting, the food banks are reporting this directly. So we are experiencing that as well. And as you say, we have immigrants that come here because the Liberals have set out a target of 500,000 immigrants on a yearly basis, which for a country of 38 to, we're close to a little bit over 38 million. That's a significant increase. And the problem is that you're actually penalizing the immigrants and the Canadian citizens when you do that.
Yeah.
So this isn't about anything this isn't anything to do with anti-immigration. And anybody on, let's say, the so-called left that would try to use that as an argument is shooting themselves in the foot, because they're actually doing a lot of damage to these newly immigrated, sometimes families, that are coming here, or individuals that they can't survive in this country. And it's been reported that in some cases they just want to go back to their home country because they're not going to be able to make it here and be able to support their families back in their country of where they came from.
Yeah.
So there has to be a balance. And of course, it's adding to the housing crisis, because when you add 500,000 people, if you just do the simple math, if they even came in couples, let's say, and there's maybe even not all of them are going to be buying a house, but even a third of them, if they're trying to buy a house, you're adding that number of demand to a supply that is far lagging behind,
Oh,
and
yeah.
will not be able to catch up with any of the policies that they have at the moment.
And one thing about the US that I've noticed, you really good, valid argument is you're giving all this money to Ukraine, you're giving all this funding, whether it be Ukraine, Israel, or whatever. You could fix the homeless crisis in the US, or you could at least, feed people instead of doing this nonsense. All these things and then all these things that they promise, like Biden, I'm going to eliminate student loans, and that's another left versus right argument. People say no, don't do. He never did anything. And then these people, it's been like this in the US for years. People have been worshiping politicians, Supreme Court justices, EBT cards, the government, you name it. And that is their way out. That is we have to bow down to the government. We have to do this. Oh, we have to be reliant on EBT. Or, what's funny is every time I put on my Fire Stick, I don't watch a lot of stuff, but I'll watch a show here and there. Every time I put on my Fire Stick, what is it? Healthcare.gov, or the new Pfizer commercial with, Travis Kelce and, Martha Stewart. It's just all the same thing, but it's all basically government related. And what's so funny is when I'm the sports that I do watch, European soccer, right? You don't see the Pfizer, you don't see this, you don't see Moderna, you see their own either Italian sponsorships or even bigger things like Fly Emeritus. You don't see healthcare, you don't see Pfizer, Moderna, you don't see big pharma. It's completely different.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, pharma has, from estimates I've heard, of 75% of the advertising is from big pharma. It doesn't surprise me, of course. So a big part of that. But just going back to the issue here is that there's nothing that's going to slow down this economic collapse at the moment.
No,
it is
not
past
at all.
the tipping point. As they say, the only thing that could slow it down is that if there is an election called in the near future, and if the Conservatives actually, because they're going to win it, the landslide probably, if they actually live up to the promises and they're manage things right, that the bank rate, the bank rate of Canada is going to be a key factor, that it can be reduced, so that in terms of slowing down the inflation and so forth, just to kind of put it. But basically, we've got generations in order to pay off the debt, which has gone from a couple of $1 billion up to $40 billion debt in Canada. It's unheard of. They never had such a high debt, and they keep trying to point to agencies, credit agencies, say, "Oh, Canada has a AAA rating." Well, that doesn't, you can't eat that rating. You
No.
can't rent your house with that rating. It's just, and it makes me think that these rating agencies, I think that they're part of the problem. I think that they're not giving up, they're giving a kind of favorable rating because they're part of the let's say the agenda. So they want to give something to the Liberals in order to give them a sense that they can, look at our economy and say it's actually doing well, which is there's no evidence, real evidence of that at all. So people, and the interesting thing is they say the unemployment rate has gone down, but you know why it's gone down?
That?
Because people can't afford to pay their rent, so they have to take on a second job, or a spouse that normally took care of their kids.
Same thing here. Yeah,
it's just playing with the numbers and the stats.
It's insane. And then you hear, well, in the U.S. too. I mean, look at something like healthcare costs. It's just ridiculous. Like even with me, I have dental, right? And with my dental, I got the exam free. I have pretty decent dental insurance. I was lucky to find someone that doesn't use that poisonous mercury amalgam, but they also use the, it's you can just tell that they're playing a game, because they're having me come back twice. They're saying, hey, you have to go once for this side of the teeth cleaning, and another time in 2 weeks later for the other half. Whereas growing up, I always went for, it was one cleaning. That was it. And it wasn't half of your teeth and half of your other teeth.
I've never heard that one. Yeah.
No, and then what's so funny is they play the, religious game, because they got the scripture right on there, the side of the building. And I'm just lucky I didn't go to the upstairs section. I think it was a different doctor, because they had that whoever it was has had a mask and the face shield on, which I haven't seen in ages.
Okay.
Do not bring back that face shield. But it just goes to say, and then they said after that, oh, well, you're gonna have to go in and get your root canal redone. And it's like, do these people realize that we don't have billions of dollars? You know what I mean? And that we see right through them. There's alternatives too, like taking certain probiotics or taking certain supplements. And what's going on with that in Canada? Are they trying to ban supplements still?
Because yes, they are. They're trying to ban. Imagine that. Well, they're trying to put the
or natural health products or whatever,
nutrient, into the same category and safety regulations as basically pharmaceutical drugs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's a very sneaky way to try to attack that industry, because that's what they do. It's all these sneak tactics to try to undermine, all these alternative health, food stores and products, right? That's what they're trying to do. So I have to see where that bill is, where it's at. It hasn't passed yet, but it's something that I need to look at too. It's something I was thinking about looking into. But it's definitely, they're trying to push that one. So here's another example. You're talking about dental, right? So the NDP, Liberal coalition. So the NDP is trying to push for a universal pharmacare. Actually, they already did the dental, already passed. They did a dental one where they were able to, give out. It's like this is the way they try to do things in Canada. Is it's a socialist way of thinking in terms of just throwing money at the people to try to help them survive, rather than giving them the tools and let them try to survive, and then providing support, at a much more efficient way to the people that really need it.
Yeah.
So this is the problem in Canada, like kind of general, the socialist way of thinking, and it permeates definitely. It's actually part of the political culture, whether you're on the left or right, because you never would even dare think about having a two-tier medical system. It's still very
No.
controversial, although there's a lot of doctors that are doing it. Actually, you can actually go to doctors, they have a private practice, they're allowed, and you can go and pay and get service, and you won't be waiting like 6 months to get a certain test that you need to find out if you need to do a procedure.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a two-tier system that's growing out of it because of the crisis that we're having in our Medicare system here. But this is the way they do things, is to throw money at different programs. Now they want to do it for a universal pharmacare. That's what the NDP is trying to do. In order to maintain their coalition, they've given a deadline to the end of the year for the Liberals to push this bill into the Parliament for their first sitting, at least, to pass this pharmacare, universal pharmacare. So trying to pay for people's pharmaceuticals. We don't pay for pharmaceuticals. We have to go to when we go to the doctor, he gives us a prescription. Then we go to the pharmacy, and of course we have to pay for it right there. And usually we'll have some insurance that'll cover that.
Yeah, same here in US.
We got to pay the price there. So, but they want to introduce, like the universal health care, they want to introduce universal pharmacare.
Oh.
The cost of that, my God, you're just like, you're going to make people sick just from the stress of having to have, to pay for this program from the extra taxes that they're going to have to collect, and they're going to get sicker and sicker.
Sure, yeah.
You have to use more and more pharmaceutical products. It's crazy, right? So that's another thing that they're trying to push for up here in Canada, and it's not looking good. But the only good positive signs we have is that in terms of this Liberal NDP coalition is really, it's shaking now, and there's a strong possibility that we might have a spring election.
Okay.
Yeah, because as soon as they have a vote of non-confidence, and actually the Conservatives already said, for the budget statement that they wanted a vote of non-confidence, but they know that the NDP is still going to support the because they're trying to ride this wave so that they can stay in power and have an influence on the policies. But really, it's just the leader, them. A lot of speculation. It's the leader of that party is just trying to stay in power long enough so he gets his pension. Yeah. That's kind of the general consensus. Because he's gone against all the principles of the NDP in order to maintain this unholy alliance. So keep an eye out. We'll keep an eye out for this spring. There's a very strong possibility that there's going to be a spring election, and we need to get this joker out of power, because he's damaging our country in such
for sure. And then this is two people who are not political at all. And for me, in comparison to obviously you're in a much bigger city, Montreal, but for me, like rent 2-bedroom is $1,500. Gas prices $2.99 a gallon. Do you think that's decent, or is that
okay, so let's do a comparison.
Sure.
Let me just convert that. So you say it's $1,500, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
2-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yep. 2-bedroom. Because it's just so
and washer and dryers inside the unit.
I'll just do the rent. I won't. The gas we'll talk about separately.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Let's see, times 1.25. So 2,000. That is on the very low end of what we're paying in Canada for major cities. That's very low. The lowest ones were like for example, Saskatoon
Oh,
was
sure.
about
Okay.
2,000. But you're looking, that's the low end. So you're paying at the low end of what a Canadian would pay in any major city across the country for a two-bedroom apartment.
Okay.
So, and as for the gas, $2.99 per gallon.
Because you guys have liters. Yeah.
Here it's liters, but I'll do a quick conversion because I'm curious to know how that compares with what we're paying at the moment. So convert here. We're going to go from liters to gallons, right? So gallon. There, right. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, because right now, I'll just tell you what we're paying per liter here. So
Okay.
it's about 2.2. Yeah. So we're paying $1.50 Canadian per liter. Now, that would be about a bit over the three something, 350 per gallon. Then you convert to US. So we would be not far off from that.
Okay.
So it seems high. What you're paying seems high because usually Canada is higher. We've always had higher gas prices.
Well, I know
the
like
funny
in
thing,
Arizona, it's like probably like 450 right now.
yeah, So it's we're definitely seeing very high prices here as well. Luckily, I live close to a First Nations reservation, and
Mhm.
there's no taxes, and they charge about 10 cents less. So I usually fill up on the
Okay.
reservation. But in terms of comparisons, you can see that in Canada, for a two-bedroom means that usually if it's a two-bedroom apartment, so that's a couple, at least maybe two people, sometimes a single person, sometimes two people, and they have a family, they have a child. It's not supportable. Like I cannot live in major urban centers. It's in fact in Vancouver, it is considered now one of the most expensive cities for real estate
Oh
in
yeah.
the
Okay.
world. And the schools have closed down in central Vancouver because there's so fewer children. People that want to live the lifestyle and live in Vancouver have to make a choice, in terms of not having a family because it's too expensive if you're
Yeah.
living in central Vancouver. And I've spoken to people about that situation. So that's what we're living with. That's the situation that we're in here. It's we're not going to get out of this very shortly. So we just
No,
have
and
to.
there's not like something we can just magically do to snap our fingers and get out of it. The only,
Nope. I mean, it's people are just like we're trying to find ways to just whatever we can save our money nowadays. Like people go on fewer trips, try to work at home so you spend less money on gas going commuting and so forth. Whatever things we can do to survive, it's possibly approaching like what we experienced during the Depression in the
Mhm.
30s. It's not a recession. It could actually explode into a full-fledged depression because you see the lineups in the food banks are increasing just like they did during the Depression.
Sure, yeah.
So it's
And
not
I
a
think
rosy
here too, I
prospect.
think there's some illegal things going on with these handing out of EBT cards because like several times there'd be like people in Arizona. When I was in Arizona, I don't know about here, but who would be paying with like multiple EBT cards, and one of them would be like state of Ohio. And it's like that's nowhere near Arizona. What the heck's going on here? I don't know.
Yeah, people are doing what they can do to survive. Oh, here's an interesting story. Okay,
Yeah.
so just to show you the level of desperation at my local grocery store, because my daughter, she has a 3-month-old baby. She lives with us,
Yeah.
okay, because it's impossible for them to live in an apartment. That's
Oh,
just an
sure.
example right there, right?
Yeah.
So I went to get some baby formula at the
Hmm.
local store. Now,
Sure.
the last time I went to buy it, it was on the shelf there. When I went this time, the shelves were empty. They had all the identification for the baby formula,
Yeah.
but there was, it was like, I thought to myself, are they out of stock? That's really strange. So I left the store, and I thought honestly that they were out of stock. I go to another store and I can't find. I call up my wife and I say, "Dear, like, I can't seem to get baby formula. What, like, where can I buy it?" And she said, "Well, you actually, it's at our regular grocery store, but you have to go and ask somebody to go pick it up from the stock behind, because they don't keep it on the shelf
Is it locked up
because
because of
people are stealing it
shoplifters? Yeah, that's what I
because
thought. Same thing in the
because of the
US.
price, and they can't afford it."
Oh yeah. Even at the Walmart out here, they have and that's the only store I've seen it at. They even have like socks and underwear locked up.
Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, these are the times that we're living in. I think we'll, end it right about there, and all I can say is, keep on standing against this. And we're two people who, are just care about all of humanity. We don't play this left versus right. We don't play this conquer and divide strategy. We don't play this, we're for peace, we're against war.
Exactly.
So just keep on, connecting with people like us, connecting with others, and just being aware of your surroundings.
Good.
Yeah,
It's good advice, Mark. I mean,
yeah,
we just want to, people need support more than ever these days, and either just moral support to just whatever they're going through. So,
yeah.
uh, yeah, amen to that.
And
So,
much love to everyone in the world. So
yeah, peace to everyone out there.
yeah.
And thanks for whoever's going to be watching. Thank you for taking the time to watch as well.
Oh yes.